today I wanted to show you my lovely Charizard Entei deck for the Prismatic Evolutions format, and I think that Entei is a very underrated partner for Zard. Like, some decks have used Entei and had success with it, but I feel like not enough decks use it right now, and I think the Prismatic Evolutions format is perfect for this card. And I think that Zard as a whole is just kind of underrated in this format because it's got a lot of issues coping with a Buddy-based format. Like, it turns off your rare candies and your ball searches and all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to try and make a deck that was kind of not necessarily immune to Buddy, but something that could fly in the current meta. And so I have built a deck that is running Charizard and Entei. And we're going to talk a little bit about the deck. I'll go through the entire list, and we'll see why I've decided to pair these two together, and why I think it's really good in the current format. Also, before I start going through the deck list, I just wanted to mention that I did take the deck to a cup today, and I actually managed to get 3rd place, going 5-0 undefeated in Swiss, before losing to Cloth in Top Cut. After having bricked. So yeah, I think the deck is pretty good, and I've managed to prove that. So yeah, now let's get to the actual deck list. Alright, let's start things off with the Pokemon. So first of all, we have 3 Charmander. This is obviously just some normal Charmander. This one is a promo, which has the Ember attack that does 40 damage, and you discard 1 energy. It's nothing that different to like these ones that just have Blazing Destruction. I think these ones are the better ones, but I just like having this because like he's really cute, and I think the card looks pretty cool. And also the Ember attack can come in handy sometimes if you want to like 2-shot a Mimikyu or something. I don't know. It's super niche. I don't think it's like important to say like this is the objectively best Charmander. I think like this one's more optimal, but you know, I just like running this. Then we have 1 Charmeleon in the deck, just 1. And this one has that Flare Veil ability that allows you to protect against effects of attacks. So it is immune to TM Devolution, but most importantly, it is immune to Phantom Dive's damage counters. So you could have this on the bench when you're fighting Dragapult, and they cannot do anything because, well, they can attack it for 200, but they can't attack it while it's on the bench with that 6 damage counters, because damage counters are considered an effect, and so this blocks that. Then we, of course, have 2 Charizard EX. This is, of course, our main attacker in the deck. It's got that Infernal Rain ability that allows you to get all your energy, or to get 3 energy and attach them to any of your Pokemon. And this allows you to effectively power up the Zard the moment that it spawns in. And then, of course, you have that Burning Darkness attack that does 180 base damage plus 30 for each prize card your opponent has taken. Then, this is just a line that we have. It's just a very standard kind of line. Some people could play like 4 Charmander or 3 Zard, but this is just what has been run for a long time now, because you need room to play your other stuff, and typically you only want 2 Charmander on the field at any given time, so having 3 is just really useful in case you prize one. But yeah, that's like the main attacker of the deck. Now moving on to the main draw engine of the deck, we are of course using the Pidgeot engine. We have 2 Pidgey, then we're running 2 Pidgeotto, actually, not just 1, but 2 Pidgeotto, and then 2 Pidgeot EX. Now, of course, Pidgeot EX is used because of that quick search ability. It's just super useful to be able to search for any card you need during your turn. And even though it is a stage 2 and it takes time to evolve, it is still a really good ability that cannot be underestimated. It also has an attack for 120 damage, but typically you just want it for that ability. Now, the reason why we have 2 Pidgeotto in the deck is because, I'm going to spoil the stadium, we're using Grand Tree, and typically we want to use Grand Tree with the Pidgeotto, or with the Pidgeot, to get the Pidgeot into play, and so we need 2 Pidgeotto to confirm that we can get it. The reason why we're running 2 of those and only 1 Charmeleon is because Grand Tree does not activate Zard's ability, so the chances that we're going to need to evolve from Grand Tree into Zard is very slim, because you'll need to attach twice, one before and one after, if you want to like be optimal with it. So typically Grand Tree is going to be a one-time use thing, only to get Pidgeot out. You could also use it for Dusknoir, which we will get into in a little bit, but typically it's just for Pidgeot, and that's why we have 2 Pidgeotto and only 1 Charmeleon. Next we have of course, our Dusknoir line. We're running 2 Duskull, 1 Dusclops, and 1 Dusknoir. And the reason why is because Dusclops and Dusknoir are just really good. They allow you, so Dusclops allows you to put 5 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. If you use this ability, it is knocked out. Dusknoir is the same, but it's 13 instead. And the reason why this is good is because you can hit higher numbers, and knocking out your own Pokemon is pretty useful, because Zard, of course, has that ability that says does more damage, or that attack that says does more damage for each prize card your opponent has taken. So sometimes forcing your opponent to take a prize card will allow you to hit higher numbers, like 210 for Ogerpon, 240 on Raging Bolt, 270. Doesn't really hit too much, but if you attach a Defiance Band, that does 300, which does hit quite a lot of things. So yeah, very useful to have this line in the deck. Then of course we have our traditional support Pokemon that Zard would have. We have a Rotom V to draw some cards. This one has that instant charge ability that allows you to draw 3 and then ends your turn. Very useful at the start of the game. Lumineon V, which has that Luminous Sign ability allowing you to search for a supporter. Typically you'd want to get Arven with this, and then attach Forest Seal using Arven and just immediately start your combo and everything. And then Fez is just useful as an extra draw engine, where if your Pokemon were knocked out during your opponent's last turn, you can draw 3 cards, which is always like really useful. Now some other support Pokemon that we have in the deck are Cleffa, of course. Cleffa is very useful. I think that Zard gets very, very good use out of Cleffa, because if you just have a Poffin, right, and you can't do anything else with your hand, getting Cleffa is really useful. And also, Cleffa allows you to draw until you have 7 cards in your hand, which means sometimes you can get more cards with Cleffa than you would with Rotom. It's also really useful if you want to create a single prize board state at the start of the game, or if you want to pair this with, we're going to talk about Entei in a little bit, but if you want to pair this with Entei and you don't want to have multiple 2 prize liabilities on the board, you don't want to get a Rotom, you can just get a Cleffa, and that should be able to get you some cards instead of just getting the 2 prize Rotom. So one disadvantage is that you can't use Forest Sealstone on Cleffa, but you can search for Cleffa with Poffin, which is very useful. Then we have Radiant Charizard, of course, very, very important card here. This one allows you to do 250 damage for 1 fire and 4 colorless, but it's got that ability Excited Heart that says the Pokemon's attacks cost 1 colorless energy less for each prize card your opponent has taken. So if your opponent is on 2 prizes, you can attack with Radzard for only 1 fire energy, and even though it can't use it twice in a row, typically you only want to use it to offset the prize trade, as it is a 1 prize attacker. So if your opponent is on 2 prizes, you can attack with Radzard, maybe take a knockout, but if they respond by killing your Radzard, you will now have that kind of lead, because they will only be able to take 1 prize card from your Radzard, and then you can swing in and take your final 2 and effectively win the game. Very useful for offsetting the prize trade, especially in decks like Raging Bolt, Archaladon, and sometimes Palkia. I don't know if there's any other decks that currently are susceptible to being hit by Radzard, but it is a very good card to have. And then finally we have Entei V. Now this is a card that I've wanted to talk about for a little bit, and I think it is really good currently. Now here is my reasoning. First of all, let's take a look at what the card does. It is a basic fire Pokemon, which is worth 2 prizes, which is very important to note. And it has an ability, Fleet-Footed, which says once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in the active spot, you may draw a card, which can be useful because having an extra card every turn is really helpful, especially in a deck like this, which relies so heavily on combos, being able to draw an extra card is just incredibly useful. I played a couple games today where Fleet-Footed came in clutch so hard. I managed to get a Poffin on turn 1 from Fleet-Footed, managed to get a Rare Candy on turn 2, allowing me to continue my combo. It's just a really useful ability. And then its attack, Burning Rondo, does 20 damage plus 20 for each bench Pokemon, both yours and your opponent's. Which means with both players having full benches, which you probably want to do in this game, especially at the start, this attack can do a maximum of 220 damage. Now this can be really useful, because 220 is not a bad number by any means. You can use this to combo with Dusknoir or with Zard, and you can take some pretty hefty knockouts. But why are we even running Entei V in the first place? Well, right now, Buddy is making it really difficult for us to do basically anything. It is a single prize baby Pokemon which has a free attack that allows you to stop your opponent from playing any item cards during their next turn, which means we will not be able to play Rare Candy to evolve our Pokemon. Now, of course, like I said before, we are running the Grand Tree in the deck. I'll explain what this does later, but it allows us to basically Rare Candy without Rare Candy, and this is Stadium non-item, so we can play it while under item lock. But sometimes getting that Grand Tree can be really difficult. Getting other methods to evolve can be difficult as well. So having that extra draw power from Fleet-Footed is very useful. But not just the draw, because if we are able to attack with Entei, then this means that we have an attacker on the field that our opponent is now forced to deal with. If they item lock next turn, we can just keep swinging with Entei again and again and again, and if they keep item locking, well, they're just going to lose the game, right? So they cannot item lock you multiple times. If you have an Entei on the field, they likely don't want to item lock you even once, right? So having that Entei is very, very useful. Originally, I ran Magma Basin to accelerate the energy and try and get it in one turn, but it was very inconsistent, and I had to cut Grand Tree to make room for it, and I was running Prime Catcher instead. But I think this build without the Magma Basin and while using the Grand Tree is way better, because you can still get use out of your Grand Tree and everything. And to power it up, you typically need to attach twice. You could also use Zard's Infernal Rain ability to get that energy on here, so you can search for 3 fire Pokemon, or 3 fire energy, attach them to any of your Pokemon, so you can put 1 here and 2 here, and then attach 1 for turn, or some combination of it. But I think it works really well. Also, it works really well into Lugia, because while it might be a little bit hard to pilot, since we're not running a specific Lugia tech, Entei is not a Terra Pokemon, so it does not get one-shot by Regigigas like Charizard will. So in Lugia, maybe you might want to consider attacking with Entei to try and take some quick knockouts, just try and get some prize cards and stuff while you set up Zard. Or you could use it to avoid being knocked out in one hit by Regigigas. You might get hit by it eventually, but sometimes, like, say they attack you with Regigigas and your Zard dies, then having an extra attacker in the form of Entei can be very useful, and you can attack something on their bench. That way they have a Regigigas all powered up, but they have no targets, because you don't have another Zard set up. Which, I think all of these are great reasons to run the Entei. If you're wondering what I cut from my original list to add in the Entei, it was actually the second Charmeleon, and my reasoning is, if we prize the one Charmeleon, we can just attack with Entei, right? But if we don't prize it, then sure, things can go well. But yeah, I honestly think Entei is really good, and especially considering the deck has started to feel a little bit bricky, having that extra card can be game-changing. So yeah, Entei, I think, will bring a lot of success. Maybe not as much as you might think, but at the same time, it's an extra attacker and an extra draw like support that can be very, very helpful. So now let's move on to trainers. Okay, so let's start off with the items. Of course, as every good Zard deck has, we have 4 Buddy-Buddy Poffins. Now this card is very useful. Having 4 of them is pretty much crucial in a Zard deck. Allows you to search for up to 2 basic Pokemon with 70 HP or less and put them onto your bench. This will allow us to get our Charmander, our Pidgey, our Duskull, our Cleffa, a lot of stuff that we need in the deck for it to function. We are also running 3 Nest Balls right here. And these 3 Nest Balls can be very helpful because sometimes you want to get Rotom, you want to get Entei, you want to get, I don't know, Fez, Radzard, something. Or maybe you just need an extra basic. So Nest Ball can be very useful, and having 3 of them means that you will get it more consistently in your starting hand. Now, here's where things get a little bit weird. We are running 3 Ultra Ball only, not 4. And I decided to cut the 4th Ultra Ball for the Nest, because I was originally on 2 Nest and 4 Ultra, but I think having 3 is really useful. Plus, another part of my reasoning was Grand Tree is kind of an Ultra Ball in and of itself. Like, you know, it's a Rare Candy plus an Ultra Ball, pretty much. That's the way I see it. So, yeah, honestly, I think the Ultra Ball count is, like, fine. It might not be optimal, but I think it's okay. Plus, we also run a TM Evolution in the deck, which I haven't mentioned yet, but it's also kind of an Ultra Ball search card, sorta, kinda. Plus, of course, we have the Entei to like assist us with our draw, if we need it. So I think 3 Ultra Ball can be fine. Then we have 3 Rare Candies, same reason as Ultra Ball. We're running Grand Tree, we're running TM Evolution, plus Buddy exists. So 3 Rare Candy is pretty okay. It's actually what most people are running these days, just because of Buddy. Then, of course, some, like, normal stuff. We're running 2 Super Rod, so that we can search, or, like, so we can get stuff back from the discard pile and put them into our deck. And then we have 1 Counter Catcher. Unfortunately, we don't have room for a second one, but I think the meta right now is slow enough to the point where we don't exactly need the second Counter Catcher. And then we have 1 Lost Vacuum in the deck to deal with tools. This is primarily for Gardevoir, so that you can get rid of their Bravery Charms, but it's also useful if you want to get rid of an annoying Stadium, or a tool on your opponent's Pokemon that isn't a Bravery Charm, like an Ancient Booster Capsule, or a Hero's Cape, or something. It's also really useful in the Raging Bolt matchup. Right now, Raging Bolt is not that strong, but it will be post-rotation. I mean, Lost Vacuum is rotating, but I don't know. Like, Guardy is really good right now. I think having a Guardy tag is pretty good. You could cut the Lost Vacuum and put in an extra consistency card or an extra counter catcher, but I honestly think that the Lost Vacuum is pretty good. So that's the items done. Let's move on to supporters. Okay, so for the supporters, we are running, of course, for Arven. Arven allows you to search for an item card and a tool card. Very, very important, because we have some very useful items that we need at the start of the game, and some even more useful tools that we need to set up, even under item lock, so that we are able to play the game pretty much. And Arven is just like our main supporter. It's how we get stuff up and running pretty much. So I think having 4 is a necessity. And then next up, we are running 3 Iono. Now, I think, personally, 3 Iono is non-negotiable. And the reason why is because right now, Buddy exists, first of all, so you need a supporter that allows you to not only disrupt your opponent's hand, but also get more cards for yourself. Iono allows you to put your hand on the bottom of your deck and draw a card for each of your remaining prize cards, which is very useful both in the early game and in the late game as well. Before, Zard decks were used to running 3 Iono. Then when Unfair Stamp came out, they started running Unfair Stamp and 2 Iono. But now, since Unfair Stamp is no longer an A-Spec being used, because we need a lot more setup A-Specs, a lot more, like, funky gusting and, like, trying to deal with, like, Buddy and other stuff in creative ways, having that extra hand disruption A-Spec is not very viable right now. So 3 Iono it is, and also I think it's really useful when you're under item lock to just get some extra cards into your hand. I've seen some people play 2 Iono and 1 Roxanne, and Roxanne is a supporter that allows you to both players shuffle their hands into their decks. The one who used Roxanne draws 6 and the opponent draws 2. But this can only be used if your opponent is on 3 prize cards or less. So that's what makes it a bit more situational. That's why I prefer to use 3 Iono instead, because if I draw into a Roxanne and this is still early game, I don't want that. But if I draw into Iono, great, I can use it, right? So I think Roxanne might have a lot of use, and it is definitely a good idea to replace 1 Iono with it. It's not necessary, and it's definitely very, like, it's very subjective. I think you can do well with 3 Iono. I think you can do well with 2 Iono Roxanne. I just personally prefer having 3 Iono. And then aside from our draw and search supporters, we are running 2 Boss's Orders, as one normally does. Just very useful gusting. There's not too much to say about Boss. It's just nice to have that gust. Typically with gusts, I am most comfortable with 4 in the deck, but because the deck is lacking space right now, I am not able to put in the second counter catcher, which is kind of annoying, but that just means I just need to be a little bit more conservative with my gust uses, and yeah, 2 Boss is fine. Then we have 1 Briar in the deck, and this is very useful because it allows you to take an extra prize card if your opponent has exactly 2 prize cards remaining, and if your opponent's active Pokemon is knocked out by damage from one of your Terra Pokemon, in other words, our Zard, then we can take an extra prize card from that. So if our opponent is on 2 prize cards and we are on 3, which will happen quite a lot when you're fighting Dragapult, and we kill the Dragapult using Zard with a Defiance Band that does 330, we can use Briar to take that extra prize card and win the game on the spot, which is very useful. Then we also have 1 copy of Professor Turo. This is just a nice card to have. You can cut it from the deck, but I would highly not recommend it, because Turo is just useful as a switching card. It's also useful to prevent against stall, or to just get rid of liabilities off the board. Allows you to put one of your Pokemon in play into your hand and discard all attached cards. So this has a lot of uses. You could get rid of a Rotom or a Lumineon from the bench if you think it's going to get bossed and knocked out for 2 prizes. You can use it to switch one of your Pokemon, because it goes into your hand so you can switch out the active. You can even use it to heal a Zard. Like, let's say you have a Charmeleon on bench, and you have a Zard in the active. So wait, I can actually, like, reenact this. We have a Zard in the active. Then, let's say we have a Charmeleon on the bench. And this has, like, energy, right? So then, if this has damage on it, you can play Turo to put the Zard into your hand, bring up the Charmeleon, and then the energies get discarded, and then evolve to Zard from hand, and then search for more energies and then attach them. So now you effectively have a brand new Zard that has no damage on it, when previously you had that Zard that did have damage. So that's another use case for Turo. Very useful card. I think, like, you can't really cut it from the deck. I think it's just, like, really good card. Speaking of another really good card that you cannot cut from the deck anymore, Thorton. Very, very useful if you get board wiped. Now, Thorton is a weird supporter. Choose a basic Pokemon in your discard pile and switch it with one of your basic Pokemon in play. Any attached cards, damage counters, special conditions, turns in play, and other effects remain on the new Pokemon. So, basically what this means is that, let's say you have a board, and you only have 1 Pidgey, and that 1 Pidgey gets knocked out, and you're looking at Candy Pidgeot in your hand, right? You're annoyed, right? You can't evolve into Pidgeot when you literally could have if your Pidgey didn't die. If you play Thorton, you can switch out another Charmander, a Rotom, something like that, into a Pidgey and evolve it right there, because turns in play remain on the new Pokemon. That's the main use of this card. It's also useful to get rid of liabilities and just in general respond to board wipes a lot better, because you can pull off some crazy plays out of nowhere using just Thorton, and it's really, really useful. You could even Thorton into Cleffa for, like, in the active spot to get a free retreat. With this version of the deck, you can Thorton into Entei to draw a card and attack. You can Thorton into Radzard. You can Thorton out of Radzard if you had a bad start and you had to start Radzard. You can switch it with like a Duskull or something. And speaking of Duskull, we have 2 Duskull in the deck. Let's say one is discarded from some reason or other. It gets knocked out. You use Curse Blast, something. You can Thorton another Pokemon into a Duskull and evolve it into Dusclops or Dusknoir and then use Curse Blast immediately. And I think that's really cool. It even allows you to do double Dusknoir plays by reusing the same Duskull twice, pretty much, because you have one Duskull, you Curse Blast, and then you switch something else, and you Curse Blast again. And yeah, I just think like Thorton at this point has become pretty much a non-negotiable in Zard decks, especially to deal with stuff like Dragapult and Regidrago as well. It's still kind of popular. So yeah, very, very important card. Would not recommend cutting it. You could, but I really would not recommend cutting Thorton. It's just such a good card. And then that's the supporters done. Now let's take a look at tools and stadiums. This is where stuff gets kind of interesting. We of course have the Forest Sealstone and the Defiance Band as always, but we're also running a TM Evolution to deal with Buddy once again. Now let's explain what all of these do. Forest Sealstone, pretty simple. If this is attached to a Pokemon V, such as a Rotom V, Lumineon V, or in this case an Entei V, you can use this ability once per game. The ability Star Alchemy allows you to search for a card and put it into your hand, any card, so you can basically Arven for Candy and Forest Sealstone for Pidgeot, and then evolve immediately. All that from just one Arven, which is really cool. It also has this really cool combo of you can like bench Lumineon and use Luminous Sign to search for Arven for the Forest Sealstone, and then attach the Forest Sealstone to the Lumineon and use it, which is really useful. Forest Sealstone is just a very good card. It tends to get prized sometimes, which is kind of annoying, but that doesn't deny its power. It's very, very good. Defiance Band, always been used in Zard. Some people have cut it. I personally really like it still, especially with Dragapult being popular again. It allows the Pokemon that this card is attached to do 30 extra damage to your opponent's active Pokemon if you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent. Basically, if you're losing the game. So you could use like Dusknoir or something, put yourself behind on prizes, then use this to do 30 extra damage. Or maybe you're already losing, right? Zard is a comeback deck. So you are likely behind on prizes for a good chunk of the game. So you can just use this to do some extra damage, and it can be very, very helpful. And then we have TM Evolution. This is one of our latest additions to the deck because of the Badu format. Basically, it's a TM. You can attach it to one of your Pokemon, and if it is attached, the Pokemon can use this attack evolution. For one colorless energy, choose up to 2 of your benched Pokemon. For each of those Pokemon, search your deck for a card that evolves from that Pokemon, and put it onto that Pokemon to evolve it. So now this allows us to have these 2, and then next turn, if we have it in hand, we can just evolve into Zard and evolve into Pidgeot. So this allows us to effectively set this up without using items, which is very useful. Now you might be wondering, we have Grand Tree as well, which we'll talk about in a bit. Why do we need the TM Evolution? Well, there's a lot of reasons. First of all, Forest Sealstone is our only way to search for Grand Tree, so if Forest Sealstone is prized, we can't get Grand Tree. If Grand Tree is prized, we can't get Grand Tree. So having this is very useful. Also, this can be useful even if you have Grand Tree. For example, you can Grand Tree into Pidgeot, and use the TM Evolution anyway to get like a Charmeleon and a Dusclops. But you could also use the TM Evolution instead if you already have Pidgeot or something in hand. If you use TM Evolution, it's basically you telling your opponent that they cannot item lock you next turn. If your opponent sees you use TM Evolution, they will just not be able to item lock you, because if they do, you're just going to evolve to Pidgeot and Zard next turn. So they need to respond by knocking out one of these 2 Pokemon, so then they will not be able to item lock you. Of course, that's kind of niche, because if these get knocked out, then you're kind of screwed anyway. But it's still, like, very important to think about when thinking about TM Evolution. I just think it's a really nice card to have in the deck. Now, finally, we can talk about Grand Tree. Grand Tree has a lot of text. Once during each player's turn, that player may search their deck for a Stage 1 Pokemon that evolves from one of their basic Pokemon and put it onto that Pokemon to evolve it. If that Pokemon was evolved in this way, that player may search their deck for a Stage 2 Pokemon that evolves from that Pokemon and put it onto that Pokemon to evolve it. Then that player shuffles their deck. Players can't evolve a basic Pokemon during their first turn or a basic Pokemon that was put into play this turn. That was a lot to take in. Let me explain it. Okay, so this is our board. Let's say we have the Grand Tree in hand. If we place down the Grand Tree and use it, it's a stadium, so it's not blocked by Buddy, then we can choose one of our basic Pokemon. Actually, we don't need to choose. We can just look in our deck for a Stage 1 Pokemon that evolves from one of them. So we have a Pidgeotto here. We can evolve that. Now, if it was evolved in this way, we can search for the Stage 2, the Pidgeot EX, and get it right there. Very useful card, because it's effectively replacing a Rare Candy and an Ultra Ball, allowing you to get your Pidgeot set up immediately. Of course, you can use it again, like say, if we had a Duskull here, we could have searched for Dusclops and Dusknoir. If we had a Charmander, we could search for Charmeleon and Zard. Now keep in mind, if you Grand Tree into Zard, the ability does not take effect, because it says when you play this Pokemon from your hand specifically. This is not being played from the hand, this is being played from the deck. Now, why would you use Grand Tree instead of just using Rare Candy? First of all, that's a great question. That's why no one used Grand Tree in the first place. People were always just Candy Zard, or Candy Pidgeot, Candy Zard, which was just the way things went for the longest time. But now that Buddy is here, Candy is a lot more likely to get stopped by Buddy, which means you can't use it as often. And because of that, you need to find alternate ways to evolve, which is why we are running the TM Evolution and the Grand Tree to allow us to evolve while under item lock. And this is even useful outside of item lock, because you can use it multiple times and you don't need to search for the evolution, right? Because you just use the Grand Tree to search for it and it evolves right there and then, which is extremely useful. And then finally, to top off the list, we are running 5 basic fire energy. Some people may think this is too low, but this is the optimal number, and all you need to do if you don't have energy is just be mindful of your resource discarding and use your super rods wisely. Make sure you don't use a super rod to get back just 1 energy unless you really have to, like if you're really struggling on cards and you need to Cleffa for as many cards as you can, then yeah, that's an exception. But typically speaking, you want to get at least 2 energy, or at least 2 targets from your super rods, and make sure you're using them effectively. But yeah, 5 energy is good. Unfortunately, with this deck, 5 energy does pose certain problems. For one, you might not always have energy in your hand, so attacking with Entei might be hard. Retreating with Entei will be even harder. That's why we have the Turo in the deck. And using TM Evolution is also a problem. I've seen a lot of decks that are running 5 fire energy and a TM Evolution, but no Grand Tree. And that just baffles me, because you can't use TM Evolution without having that energy. So, yeah. This is like just some important stuff to be mindful of. That's why we have Grand Tree in the deck, because you don't always have the energy in your starting hand. And since we have no way of searching for it in the deck without Forest Sealstone, which you don't want to waste Forest Sealstone on energy, this is just like something that's very important to keep in mind. But otherwise, that is pretty much the entire deck. We've got all the Pokemon, the trainers, the energies, and then all the different ways we're dealing with Buddy, and of course the lovely Entei V. I honestly think the Entei is a very underrated component of this deck. I just thought like it was kind of important, because if you are the like really, really like prevalent aggressor at the start, they can't item lock you. They don't have time to item lock you because you will swing so quickly with this that they can't stop you from using items. So you can just Rare Candy Pidgeot, Rare Candy Sard. In fact, at one point I was thinking of not playing TM Evolution, the Pidgeotto, the Grand Tree. I was thinking of cutting all of that, just adding another Rare Candy, and making the deck as consistent as possible. But the issue with that is that if Entei V is prized, or if for some reason you're not able to get it out, that is a problem, because then they will just item lock you for days and you cannot do anything. But if you are able to get out the Entei and use it, it is very good. Of course, you don't want to go for Entei all the time. It's not needed. It's not required for every game, but it is very useful to have in the deck, and I highly recommend trying it out at least. Yeah, it's just like really fun and really good. But yeah, I don't know if it's the best way of playing Zard. Maybe the double Charmeleon, double Pidgeotto with the Grand Tree is the best way right now. Maybe just completely ignoring Buddy and just playing like one copy of TM Evo and one Pidgeotto. Maybe that's the way. Originally, when I made this list, like I said, I was running Magma Basin and Prime Catcher. I still had the TM Evolution and one Pidgeotto, I think, in the deck still. But I decided to just go back to the Grand Tree route and run the Entei still. And I think this is way better, honestly. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Tell me if there's any modifications that you would do to this deck. Anything you would add to improve consistency, give this deck more lines of play, try and find more attackers, more ideas for attackers, like basic attackers that don't need evolving into a stage 2. Because the main issue and the main reason why I added the Entei is because the deck is just sometimes kind of bricky. So having that extra draw and having an alternate attacker and not needing to set up Zard that quickly can be very helpful. But yeah, otherwise, leave your suggestions in the comments and I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching.